The Sprint Retrospective is the last of the 5 Scrum events. It's held at the end of each sprint after the sprint review. It's an opportunity for the Scrum team to plan ways to increase quality and effectiveness. The Sprint Retrospective is timeboxed to 3 hours. For shorter sprints, it's common to proportionally shorten this time box. In the Sprint Retrospective, the Scrum team inspects how the last sprint went with regards to individuals, interactions, processes, tools, and their definition of done. Inspected elements in a sprint review often vary depending on the domain of work. Assumptions that led them astray are identified and their origins are explored. The Scrum team discusses what went well during the sprint, what problems it encountered, and how those problems were or were not solved. By the end of the Sprint Retrospective, the Scrum team should have identified and planned improvements to increase its effectiveness. The most impactful improvements are addressed as soon as possible and perhaps as early as the next sprint. Improvements identified may span more than the next sprint, and they will be revisited in the later sprint retrospectives where they do. Although improvements may be implemented at any time, the Sprint Retrospective provides a formal opportunity to focus on inspection and adaptation around the Scrum team itself. The Sprint Retrospective should be a positive and productive event. Things will have gone wrong or could have been carried out differently and perhaps better. We don't want to dwell on these. Instead, we accept we acted as best we could under the constraints and circumstances we found ourselves in at the time. The next sprint is a chance to improve and do things better, so we focus on how we can make this happen. At the heart of the Sprint Retrospective is the concept of continuous improvement. The Scrum team takes ownership of the process they use and regularly makes improvements to its ability to develop the product. The complex environment around the Scrum team is changing constantly, so it's vital the Scrum team builds the capability to adapt to these changing conditions and that this becomes a continuous part of their process. Change is the only constant, and the Scrum team needs to learn how to constantly adapt to change. Scrum does not describe the techniques used to conduct a sprint retrospective. There are many ways to do it, and entire books have been written on the subject. A common good practice that many Scrum teams implement initially is a 3-step process. Step 1, identify their issues. The current situation is revealed and understood by the whole Scrum team. The output of these discussions may then be ordered so that attention can be focused on the most important, impactful, or urgent issues. Step 2, explore options. Explore potential solutions for the highly ordered issues. Step 3, plan and actions. Identify a small number of actionable improvements that the team will put into practice as early as possible, and spend the majority of the time in the Sprint Retrospective focused on this plan. Most of the available time should be spent on this plan and this action section. The Sprint Retrospective should result in an actionable plan that the Scrum team will implement in future sprints, designed to help them continuously improve their ability to develop the product. The practices and techniques the Scrum team uses in the Sprint Retrospective will change and improve over time. The Scrum Master may help guide the rest of the Scrum team in adopting helpful practices and adapting them as needed.